Good morning, friends. We're coming to you from Washington, D.C., United Lodge of Theosophists. Today is a special day for all Theosophical students all over the world because we are celebrating the life and work of H.P. Blavatsky, whom we reverently refer to as HPB. HPB brought the wisdom of the ages that is always in the world to the Western world in the 19th century. She never claimed it for herself, but always stated that it came from the Lodge of the Masters of Wisdom. But this effort was different than the previous ones in that for the first time it was recorded in book form. The knowledge that we have today in these books are very precious, and we can all benefit from reading it, understanding it, assimilating it, and show gratitude for the sacrifice of this great soul who came amongst humanity to give this philosophy to the Western world. This is where she initiated the effort, but then she went to India and then to London. So these three centers in the future decades and perhaps in the centuries to follow will do their work in a united effort for the whole world, because humanity is one family. We will be reading from the Bhagavad-Gita, The Light of Asia. These were very special to HPB, and she asked that her students read from these books when they came together for the celebration of her life and works. So after the readings, there will be a biographical talk, and this is followed by the last reading. The voice of the silence. Calm and unmoved, the pilgrim glideth up the stream that to nirvana leads. He knoweth that the more his feet will bleed, the whiter will himself be washed. He knoweth well that after 7 short and fleeting births, nirvana will be his. Such is the dhyana path, the haven of the yogi, the blessed goal that Soratapatis crave. Not so when he hath crossed and won the Aryahata path. There, klesha is destroyed forever, tanha's roots torn out. But stay, disciple, yet one word. Canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is no attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony, alias self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right, at fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. The more thou dost become at one with it, thy being melted in its being, the more thy soul unites with that which is, the more thou wilt become compassion absolute. Such is the Arya path, path of the Buddhas of perfection. Withal, what mean the sacred scrolls which make thee say, Om, I believe it is not all the arhats that get of the nirvanic path the sweet fruition? Om, I believe that the nirvana dharma is entered not by all the Buddhas. Yea, on your Arya path thou art no more Soratapati, thou art a bodhisattva. The stream is crossed. It is true, thou hast a right to Dharmakaya vesture, but Sambhogakaya is greater than a Nirvani. and greater still is a Nirmanakaya, the Buddha of compassion. Now bend thy head and listen well, O Bodhisattva. Compassion speaks and saith, can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shalt thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? Now thou hast heard that which was said. Thou shalt attain the seventh step and cross the gate of final knowledge, but only to wed woe, if thou wouldst be Tathagata. Follow upon thy predecessors' steps. Remain unselfish till the endless end. Thou art enlightened. Choose thy way. Behold the mellow light that floods the eastern sky. In signs of praise, both heaven and earth unite, and from the fourfold manifested powers, a chant of love ariseth, both from the flaming fire and flowing water, and from sweet-smelling earth and rushing wind. Hark! From the deep, unfathomable vortex of that golden light, in which the victor bathes, all nature's wordless voice, in thousand tones, ariseth to proclaim, joy unto ye, O men of Mialba, a pilgrim hath returned back from the other shore. A new Arhan is born. Peace to all beings.
From the Secret Doctrine. Since the beginning of the Atlantean race, many millions years have passed, yet we find the last of the Atlanteans still mixed up with the Aryan element 11,000 years ago. This shows the enormous overlapping of one race over the race which succeeds it, though in character and eternal type, the elder loses its characteristics and assumes the new features of the younger race. This is proved in all the formations of mixed human races. Now, occult philosophy teaches that even now, under our very eyes, the new race and races are preparing to be formed, and that it is in America that the transformation will take place and has already silently commenced. Pure Anglo-Saxons hardly 300 years ago, the Americans of the United States have already become a nation apart, and, owing to a strong admixture of various nationalities and intermarriage, almost a res sui generis, not only mentally but also physically. Thus, the Americans have become, in only 3 centuries, a primary race, pro tem, before becoming a race apart, and strongly separated from all other now existing races. They are, in short, the germs of the 6th subrace, and in some few hundred years more, will become most decidedly the pioneers of that race which must succeed to the European or 5th subrace in all its new characteristics. After this, in about 25,000 years, they will launch into preparations for the 7th subrace, until, in consequence of cataclysms, the first series of those which must one day destroy Europe, and still later the whole Aryan race, and thus affect both Americas, as also most of the lands directly connected with the confines of our continent and isles, the 6th root race will have appeared on the stage of our round. When shall this be? Who knows, save the great masters of wisdom, perchance, and they are as silent upon the subject as the snow-capped peaks that tower above them. The exultant pulse will beat high in the heart of the race now in the American zone, but there will be no more Americans when the 6th race commences, no more, in fact, than Europeans, for they will have now become a new race and many new nations. Mankind will not grow again into giant bodies, as in the case of the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, because while the evolution of the 4th race led the latter down to the very bottom of materiality in its physical development, the present race is on its ascending arc, and the 6th will be rapidly growing out of its bonds of matter, and even of flesh. Thus, it is mankind of the new world whose mission and karma it is to sow the seeds for a forthcoming, grander, and far more glorious race than any of those we know of at present. The cycles of matter will be succeeded by cycles of spirituality and a fully developed mind. On the law of parallel history and races, the majority of the future mankind will be composed of glorious adepts. Humanity is the child of cyclic destiny, and no one of its units can escape its unconscious mission or get rid of its burden of its cooperative work with nature. Thus will mankind, race after race, perform its appointed cyclical pilgrimage. Climates will and have already begun to change, each tropical year after the other dropping one subrace, but only to beget another higher race on the ascending cycle, while a series of less favored groups, the failures of nature, will, like some individual men, vanish from the human family without even leaving a trace behind. Such is the course of nature under the sway of karmic law, of the ever-present and the ever-becoming nature, for, in the words of a sage, known only to a few occultists, the present is the child of the past, the future the begotten of the present. Thus are the past, the present, and the future the ever-living Trinity in one. The Mahamya of the Absolute is.
From the Bhagavad-Gita. Even sages have been deluded as to what is action and what inaction. Therefore I shall explain to thee what is action by a knowledge of which thou shalt be liberated from evil. One must learn when what is action to be performed, what is not to be, and what is inaction. The path of action is obscure. That man who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men. He is a true devotee and perfect performer of all action. Those who have spiritual discrimination call him wise, whose undertakings are all free from desire, from his actions are consumed in the fire of knowledge. He abandons the desire to see a reward for his action, is free, contented, and upon nothing depends, and also engaged in action he really does nothing. He is not solicitous of results, with mind and body subdued and being above enjoyment from objects. Doing with the body alone the acts of the body, he does not subject himself to rebirth. He is content with whatever he receives fortuitously, it free from the influence of the pairs of opposites, and from envy, the same in success and failure. Even so he acts, he is not bound by the bounds of action. All the actions of such a man who is free from self-interest, who is devoted, with heart set upon spiritual knowledge, and whose acts are sacrifices for the sake of the Supreme, are dissolved and left without effect on him. The Supreme Spirit is the act of offering. The Supreme Spirit is the sacrificial butter offered in the fire, which is the Supreme Spirit. And unto the Supreme Spirit goes he who makes the Supreme Spirit the object of his meditation in performing these actions. Some devotees give sacrifices to the gods, while others, lighting the subtler fire of the Supreme Spirit, offer up themselves. Still others make sacrifice with the senses, beginning with hearing, in the fire of self-restraint. And some give up all sense-delighted sounds, and others again, illuminated by spiritual knowledge, sacrifice all the functions of the senses and vitality in the fire of devotion through self-constraint. There are also those who perform sacrifice by wealth given in alms, by mortification, by devotion, and by silent study. Some sacrifice the unbreathing in the down-breathing and the down-breathing in the up-breathing by blocking up the channels of inspiration and expiration, and others by stopping the movement of both the life breaths. Still others by abstaining from food sacrifice life in their life. All these different kinds of worshippers are by their sacrifices purified from their sins, but they partake of the perfection of spiritual knowledge arising from such sacrifices, passing to the eternal Supreme Spirit. But for him who makes no sacrifices, there is no part nor lot in this world. How then shall he share in the other, O best of the Kurus? All these sacrifices of so many kinds are displayed in the sight of God. Know that they all spring from action, and comprehending this, thou shalt obtain an eternal release. O harasser of thy foes, the sacrifice through spiritual knowledge is superior to sacrifice made with material things. Every action, without exception, is comprehended in spiritual knowledge. O son of Prita, seek this wisdom by doing service, by strong search, by questions, and by humility. The wise who see the truth will communicate it unto thee, and knowing which thou shalt never again fall into error, O son of Bharata. By this knowledge thou shalt see all things and creatures whatsoever in thyself, and then in me.
From the writings of H.P. Blavatsky. The beacon light upon which the eyes of all real Theosophists are fixed is the same towards which in all ages the imprisoned human soul has struggled. This beacon, whose light shines upon no earthly seas, but which has mirrored itself in the somber depths of the primordial waters of infinite space, is called by us, as by the earliest Theosophists, divine wisdom. This name, wisdom, or as we say sometimes, the wisdom religion or Theosophy, is as old as the human mind. The title of sages, the priests of this worship of truth, was its first derivative. These names were afterwards transformed into philosophy and philosophers, the lovers of science or of wisdom. It is to Pythagoras that we owe the name, as also that of Gnosis, the system of the knowledge of things as they are, or of the essence that is hidden beneath the external appearances. Under that name, so novel and so correct in its definition, all the masters of antiquity designated the aggregate of our knowledge of things human and divine. As Theosophy is the way that leads to truth, in every religion as in every science, so occultism, so to say, is the touchstone of universal solvent. It is the Ariadne's thread given by the master to the disciple, who ventures into the labyrinth of the mysteries of being, the torch that lights him through the dangerous maze of life, forever the enigma of the Sphinx. But the light thrown by this torch can be discerned only by the eye of the awakened soul, by our spiritual senses. It blinds the eyes of the materialists as the sun blinds that of the owl. Belief in the masters was never made an article of faith in the TS, but for its founders, the commands received from them when it was established have ever been sacred. And this is what one of them wrote in a letter preserved to this day. Theosophy must not represent merely a collection of moral verities, a bundle of metaphysical ethics, epitomized and theoretical dissertations. Theosophy must be made practical and has therefore to be disencumbered of useless discussion. It has to find objective expression in all-embracing code of life, thoroughly impregnated with its spirit, the spirit of mutual tolerance, charity, and love. It is only Theosophy well understood that can save the world from despair by reproducing social and religious reform, a task once before accomplished in history by Gautama the Buddha, a peaceful reform without one drop of blood spilt. For many a long year, the great orphan, humanity, has been crying aloud in the darkness for guidance and for light. Amid the increasing splendors of a progress purely material, of a science that nourished the intellect but left the spirit to starve. Humanity, dimly feeling its origin and presaging its destiny, has stretched out towards the east empty hands that only a spiritual philosophy can fill. Aching from the divisions, the jealousies, the hatreds that rend its very life, it has cries for some sure foundation on which to build the solidarity it senses, some metaphysical basis from which its loftiest social ideals may rise secure. Only the master of the Eastern wisdom can set that foundation, can satisfy at once the intellect and the spirit, can guide humanity safely through the night to the dawn of a larger day.
Helena Petrovna Blavatsky's lifetime of adventures and challenges started with her premature birth at around 1:42 a.m. on August 12, 1831, which is July 31 per the Julian calendar, which is used by the Orthodox Church and Russians at that time. A cholera epidemic raged, so immediate baptism was decided on. A child holding a candle in a row behind the officiating priest nodded sleepily and inadvertently set fire to his robes. HPV's father was a captain, later a colonel of artillery, and the forces of Tsar Nicholas I, the Iron Tsar. Her grandfather was counselor to the Tsar. Her great-grandfather was a prince and student of alchemy, magic, and a Kabbalist. HPB would be found reading in his library when he visited there. Her mother and grandmother were also named Helena, and both were writers, as was HPB. HPB's writings included adventures fictionalized by her and published under the title of From the Caves and Jungles of Hindustan. HPB's mother was concerned about how difficult her life would be due to the metaphysical talents she was already exhibiting to the wonder of her friends and the terror of conventionalists. When she was just 11 years old, her mother died. The servants and locals called HPB the Sejmika, which may have been in reference to her occult powers that they observed, particularly when she was a small child. HPB's worldly talents included being a professional concert pianist. She was an excellent horse rider, riding astride them rather than side saddle as conventional ladies did at that time. Her upbringing included, along with her sister Vera, being under protection of soldiers in their father's garrison, living with relatives, and extensive travels such as in Europe and Siberia with her father. On a dare her governess made that she would never be able to attract any man to ask for her hand, HPB accepted a marriage proposal by General Blavatsky, who was much older than she was. They called her the old man down the street. She then found that she could not retract her acceptance under the Russian custom at that time. The marriage was never consummated. She escaped on horseback to friends. Her father helped her thereafter. HPB and an old family friend traveled in Greece, Turkey, and Egypt. Then in London with her father in 1850, HPB met for the first time the master of her dreams. In Hyde Park, her master gave her a preview of her future mission and work. Her next 20 years, from 1851 to 1871, included traveling in preparation for her public mission. It was also said that all this travel involved her magnetizing the world. She was robbed of her property in Canada, went to New Orleans and to Mexico through Texas, then to Yucatan, Copan, Honduras, where she met a disciple of her master, then to Peru to see the ancient ruins of pre-Columbian civilizations in the Andes, went on to Ceylon and then to India, then to London, America, Japan, back to India. She crossed the Rocky Mountains in a covered wagon. It was not considered proper for a woman to travel alone in those days, so she would dress as a man. She entered Tibet the second try, after having been stopped at the border the first time she tried. Then on to India, where her stay was interrupted by her master before the outbreak of the Sepoy Mutiny. She traveled to Assam, Burma, Siam, and Java, that was the names at that time, before returning to Europe via South America, then back to Europe before returning to Russia to spend some time with her family. A family friend had heard of HPP's powers and asked to be a witness to some of the paranormal phenomena, seeing which he prophesied that she can help humanity if she uses them with discretion. She traveled to Serbia, Egypt, Syria, and met with mystic orders and sects of the Middle East. Writing of this period, she said, "I have lived with the whirling dervishes and the Druzes of Mount Lebanon, with the Bedouin Arabs and the Marabouts of Damascus." HPB also visited Venice and the Balkans. Writing of herself in 1882, she stated, "Between the Blavatsky of 1845 to 65 and 1865 to 82, there is an unbridgeable gulf." HPB fought by the Garibaldians for Italy's freedom, was wounded 5 times, and left for dead. Restored to health, she visited Florence, Egypt, back again to India, and to Tibet, to her master. She visited the Teshu Lama, and later stayed in Kashmir at the home of another master. In late 1870, she returned to Europe via Yemen and Cairo, passing through the recently opened Suez Canal. She visited her family and left again for Greece and Egypt. Sailing from Athens, her ship was wrecked when a shipment of explosives detonated. She went on to spend time in Alexandria and Cairo. It is said that she spoke the local language wherever she went. The 20 years from 1871 to 1891 were of public service consecrated to Theosophy. HPB received an order from her master to go to the United States and left the next day. She had a first-class passage, but downgraded it to steerage class in order to get passage for a woman and her children who had been sold bogus tickets. On July 7, 1873, she arrived in New York penniless. She earned money by making flowers. In 1875, HPB met for the first time in this life Mr. Judge, whose subsequent letters to him often ended, "Yours till death and after, HPB." And Mr. Judge wrote, "It was her eye that attracted me, the eye of one whom I must have known in lives long past away. She looked at me in recognition at that first hour, and never since has that look changed." On November 17, 1875, the Theosophical Society was founded. Early members included Thomas Edison and General Abner Doubleday. The TS Charter noted, quote, "As the highest development physically and spiritually on earth of the creative cause, man should aim to solve the mystery of his being. He is the procreator of his species, physically, and having inherited the nature of the unknown but palpable cause of his own creation, must possess in his inner physical self this creative power in lesser degree. He should therefore study to develop his latent powers and inform himself respecting the laws of magnetism, electricity, and all other forms of force, whether of the seen or unseen universes. The Society teaches and expects its fellows to personally exemplify the highest morality and to oppose the materialism of science and every form of dogmatic theology. HPB held open house every evening from 1876 to 1877. Many prominent persons of her day called on her. Lively discussions would ensue, lasting sometimes into early morning. Also, HPB wrote her first book, Isis Unveiled. Volume 1 deals with science, Volume 2 with theology. Mr. Judge collaborated closely with HPB and recorded, quote, Isis Unveiled exhibited immense research. The strange part of this is, as I and many others can testify as eyewitnesses, that the writer had no library in which to make researches and possessed no notes of investigation or reading previously done. All was written straight out of hand, and yet it is full of references to books in the British Museum and other great libraries, and every reference is correct. Either, then, we have, as to that book, a woman who was capable of storing in her memory a mass of facts, dates, numbers, titles, and subjects such as no other human being ever was capable of, or her claim to help from unseen beings is just. In its December 29, 1877 weekly review, London's Public Opinion called Isis Unveiled, quote, one of the most extraordinary works of the 19th century. HPB wrote, quote, Isis Unveiled contains a mass of original and never hitherto divulged information on occult subjects. Neither ideas nor teachings are mine, she said. Every word of information found in this work or in my later writings comes from the teachings of our Eastern masters, and many a passage of these works has been written by me under their dictation. Colonel Olcott wrote, the unusual richness of her intellectual nature, the delicacy and swiftness of her thought, her marvelous faculty in understanding, grasping, and assimilating the most difficult subjects, such as would require from anybody else years of laborious study, these gave her such an unusual superiority that she could never avoid attracting general attention and the consequent envy and animosity of those who, in their trivial inferiority, felt wounded by the splendor of the faculties and talents of this really marvelous woman. On July 8, 1878, HPB became a naturalized citizen of the United States, an occurrence she was proud of. 1879 and 1880 found HPB traveling widely in India. She influenced the minds of those who led the movement to gain India's eventual independence. In December 1880, the family motto of the Maharaja of Benares was adopted by the Theosophical Society. It was, quote, "There is no religion higher than truth," close quote. December 1884, HPB at Wurzburg. She's seriously ill. Countess Wachtmeister cares for her. HPB began to write The Secret Doctrine. In April 1886, the first issue of Mr. Judge's The Path was issued. HPB called it Pure Booty. Respect for HPB and for the Theosophical Society grew under Mr. Judge's leadership in America. In March 1887, an exhausted HPB fell into a coma from which she revived, as happened several times before in the past. May 1, 1887 finds HPB now in London, where her friends have arranged a place for her to stay and work. She labored day and night to bring the secret doctrine to a conclusion. A concerned Countess Wachtmeister tried to get HPB to take rest breaks, but HPB would tend to refuse. 1887 September, the first issue of HPB's magazine, Lucifer, appeared to, quote, "bring to light the hidden things of darkness," close quote. HPB said, quote, "Lucifer, the light bearer, is the morning star, and Lucifer is no profane or satanic title." November-December 1888, Mr. Judge came to London to help HPB in drafting the rules and pledge relating to the esoteric section. Mr. Judge also visited Dublin and inspired the new generation of Irish poets and writers such as W.B. Yeats and George W. Russell. October 20, 1888, Volume 1 of The Secret Doctrine was finally published. Volume 2 was issued in December. It had taken HPB 4 years to finish her magnum opus. Volume 1 covers cosmogenesis, the evolution of our Earth and of the universe. Volume 2 covers anthropogenesis, or the evolution of man on our Earth, his future role, and the goals of evolution. The Secret Doctrine is based on verses or stanzas of the Book of Zon, or Wisdom, and written in a style quite different from that of Isis Unveiled. It is both philosophically profound as well as accurate history of the evolution of nature and of man, and of the origins of religions. We are constantly rewarding or punishing ourselves in this fashion. Quote, "The hands that smite us are our own," close quote. About her own book, HPB wrote, quote, "I have made only a nosegay of cold or eastern flowers, and have brought nothing of my own but the string that ties them." Dr. Hyatt of Stamford, Connecticut, spent many years tracing the quotations and references that HPB used in The Secret Doctrine. He observed, quote, "It is difficult to appreciate the wealth of material quoted and the diversity of subjects included. They are scattered throughout the thousands of pages of the 2 volumes, so that the reader may gain a better understanding of the inclusiveness of all the different aspects of each subject presented, and that the secret doctrine is not the dogmatic presentation of any one religion or of any one philosophy or of any one science. Many of the finest minds of her time were influenced by the ideas that the secret doctrine expounded. In July 1889, HPB published The Key to Theosophy. It is written in question and answer form so that her students may learn what Theosophy is and in turn use it to teach other inquirers. The second edition, published in 1890, contains a 60-page glossary. In 1889, HPB wrote her last book, The Voice of the Silence. It was dedicated to the few, to those who desire to make Theosophy a living power in their lives. In line with the first object of the Theosophical Society, quote, to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood, quote, close quote. In July 1889, HPB was asked to open a club in a poor section of London for working women. 1890 and 1891, the transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge were issued from question and answer sessions of the Blavatsky Lodge from December 1888 to March 1889. May 8, 1891, HPB, after suffering from chronic kidney disease for years, succumbed during a flu epidemic then raging in London. She died at 2:25 p.m. in the presence of several of her friends. Her last words, as reported by her friends then present, were, quote, keep the link unbroken. Let not my last incarnation be a failure, close quote. The press around the world took note of HPB's passing and took opportunity to discuss her work and Theosophy once again. This heritage is available still in its original form. It shows us the path to perfection that we can all take if we steadfastly try. That we, our universe, and all therein are from the same source, that all evolve by natural impulse up to the human level, after which time we proceed by self-induced and self-devised methods. That each of us is a divine being, a God in the making if we choose to work in sync with the laws of nature. Critics can never find fault with what HPB presented in Theosophy, as it is correct. So they went after this mighty soul that left the body she used for our advantage with accusations, all of which were false. For example, a New York newspaper published a critical piece about HPB, which it later found to be false, but not until after her death. It invited Mr. Judge to write a report about HPB, which it published. Mr. Judge called the report the esoteric she. A survey of the mission of HPB will show: 1. It focuses attention on the Lodge of Living Adepts, specifically on their service of humanity as the preservers of knowledge and wisdom down the ages, and their help and individual progress when merited through moral excellence. 2. It declares man's immortality as a spiritual being, since a portion of the universal spirit is in him, as it is in all other beings in nature. 3. It demonstrates the universal reign of law, which no being, however powerful, can transgress. 4. It shows how cycles of civilization arose, then fell. 5. It declares that a sincere and conscientious application of the innate sense of morality everyone has, which is their voice of conscience and intuition, is the only key to spiritual and occult progress for man. 6. It demonstrates the existence of the invisible or astral or spiritual realms of being within the physical. 7. Karma, the law of moral compensation, and reincarnation are shown to be the active agents in the process of man's evolution. Man alone is the maker of his own destiny. He has the inalienable power to choose. Each individual can choose to be on the path of selfishness associated with materialism, or join the few undertaking sustained efforts to follow the path to greatness that HPB pointed to, thus elevating mankind from this dark age and ushering in the golden age. From the first of HPB's writings to the last of her numerous articles, there is an unbroken continuity of ideas, a single theme. The same basic propositions that describe the world situation is emanation from the, quote, absolute unknown, close quote, as an all-inclusive deific source. It evolves according to regular laws of progression, which take into account every part and aspect of being, including man, the atom, and the universe. Some of the great names influenced by the Theosophical movement were Dr. Albert Einstein, who kept a copy of the Secret Doctrine on his desk for ready reference; Thomas A. Edison, inventor; A.O. Hume, administrator and founder of the Indian National Congress, which is a body active in securing independence for India in 1948; Gandhi, Nehru, and the list goes on. The Theosophical movement, introduced in the 19th century, has prompted an enormous change in thinking and a more compassionate regard bent on society and the creatures in the world around us. Science has advanced tremendously. It is promising that leading scientists have since worked with the Dalai Lama, although mainline science still seems to reject the idea of the science of the soul, as it extends beyond the material, measurable level of today's scientific tools. The word Theosophy is known to many, even if they are unsure of its doctrines, ideas, or teachings. Theosophy has served to introduce some ancient Sanskrit terms into our everyday language, such as karma, dharma, yoga, nirvana, Bhagavad-Gita, Mahatma, and theosophical doctrines like reincarnation, the law of justice, universal spirit, astral body, and astral light, consciousness, and intelligence, residing in all forms and cycles of civilization. These are some powerful ideas defined and integrated into a philosophy of living. We are posting links to over 6,500 pages of works by H.P. Blavatsky as she recorded them, including where they can be found in PDF and in book form.
This reading is from the Light of Asia. Enter the path. There is no grief like hate, no pains like passions, no deceit like sense. Enter the path. Far hath he gone whose foot treads down one fond offense. Enter the path. There spring the healing streams, quenching all thirst. There bloom the immortal flowers, carpeting all the way with joy. There throng swiftest and sweetest hours. More is the treasure of the law than gems, sweeter than comb its sweetness. Its delights, delightful past compare. Thereby to live, hear the 5 rules aright. Kill not for pity's sake, and lest ye slay the meanest thing upon its upward way. Give freely and receive, but take from none by greed or force or fraud what is his own. Bear not false witness, slander not, nor lie. Truth is the speech of inward purity. Shun drugs and drinks which work the wit abuse. Clear minds, clean bodies, need no soma juice. Touch not thy neighbor's wife, neither commit sins of the flesh, unlawful and unfit. These words the Master spake of duties due, to father, mother, children, fellows, friends. Teaching how such as may not swiftly break the clinging chains of sense, whose feet are weak to tread the higher road, should order so this life of flesh that all their hither days pass blameless in discharge of charities, and first true footfalls in the eightfold path, living pure, reverent, patient, pitiful, loving all things which live even as themselves, because what falls for ill is fruit of ill wrought in the past, and what falls well of good, and that by how so much the householder purgeth himself of self and helps the world, by so much happier comes he to next stage, in so much bettered being. This reading is from the Light of Asia. Enter the path. There is no grief like hate, no pains like passions, no deceit like sense. Enter the path. Far hath he gone whose foot treads down one fond offense. Enter the path. There spring the healing streams, quenching all thirst. There bloom the immortal flowers, carpeting all the way with joy. There throng swiftest and sweetest hours. More is the treasure of the law than gems, sweeter than comb its sweetness. Its delights, delightful past compare. Thereby to live, hear the 5 rules aright. Kill not for pity's sake, and lest ye slay the meanest thing upon its upward way. Give freely and receive, but take from none by greed or force or fraud what is his own. Bear not false witness, slander not, nor lie. Truth is the speech of inward purity. Shun drugs and drinks which work the wit abuse. Clear minds, clean bodies, need no soma juice. Touch not thy neighbor's wife, neither commit sins of the flesh, unlawful and unfit. These words the Master spake of duties due, to father, mother, children, fellows, friends. Teaching how such as may not swiftly break the clinging chains of sense, whose feet are weak to tread the higher road, should order so this life of flesh that all their hither days pass blameless in discharge of charities, and first true footfalls in the Eightfold Path. Living pure, reverent, patient, pitiful, loving all things which live even as themselves. Because what falls for ill is fruit of ill, wrought in the past, and what falls well of good. And that by how so much the householder purgeth himself of self, and helps the world, by so much happier comes he to next stage, in so much bettered being.